اومدید به این برنامه زنده. Welcome to this live stream. در این روزهای اخیر در بروکسل یک کنفرانس راجع به زنان افغان بود و ما میخوایم حالا با یکی از سیاستمدارا با یکی از عضوای پارلمان اتحادیه اروپا حرف بزنیم که چه فکرایی داشت وقتی اون کنفرانس رو دید و اتحادیه اروپا حالا چه کارهایی انجام میده. So in the last days there was a conference in Brussels, Afghan Women Days it was called, and one of the participants and one of the members of the European Parliament, Tis Rutten, is now with us. Thank you for being with us, Tis. Hi.
Thank you for having me.
So my first question would be, you have been listening to a lot of Afghan politicians, Afghan artists, and like for example Ariana Sa'id, who's very popular. What is your impression about the actual situation of Afghan women? شما حالا گوش دادید مثلا به خواننده افغان، آریانا سعید هم اونجا بود تشکیل کرد و نظر شما در مورد موقعیت زنای افغان چی بود؟
Well, of course, we spoke with Afghan women who were here, but they also spoke for the millions of Afghan women and girls who are still in Afghanistan and suffering a situation of not being able to lead a life, to have fulfilled their dreams, to go to education, etc., etc., to be unfree. And it was good to speak to them, and I had the privilege to meet 8 women in the morning on Tuesday, and we had the chance to speak quite elaborately also on the pain that they still feel even being here. One of the women we spoke to said to me, and that sentence stuck to me for the whole day, she said, "I want to be here as a tourist, not as a refugee." So it was really impressive.
اوکی. ایشون میگن که زنای افغان که در بروکسل حرف زدن به نام افغان‌ها در خود افغانستان البته حرف زدن و تعریف کردن که چقدر سخته برای زنای افغانستان، چون در حال حاضر خیلیاشون نمیتونن برن مدرسه و غیر آزادن و این خیلی سخته. من با 8 زن حرف زدم، 8 زن افغان، و یکیشون به من گفت من به عنوان مسافر میخوام با شما حرف بزنم، من نمیخوام پناهجو باشم، و میگه این جمله به خصوص تو ذهن من چسبید یا مونده. Now the question is, you have been listening to them and the question is, of course, and this is the reason also we wanted to talk to you, what can the European Union do to somehow, I don't know, change or whatever, affect the situation of women in Afghanistan. So سوال ما حالا این هست که به خاطر این هم می‌خواستیم با شما حرف بزنیم، خود اتحادیه اروپا یا پارلمان اروپا چه کار میتونه بکنه که موقعیت زن‌ها حداقل خب یه ذره بهتر بشه؟
Well, I think that first of all we have to work and speak with the women who are in all these European countries and even beyond European countries, because that's a big group of people, very diverse also, from former ministers. I spoke to a former minister, a woman now living in the Netherlands, and there are many also people who worked as an artist, as a journalist. So we have to speak to all these women that are in our countries and that say to me, we don't want to give up on Afghanistan, because we also feel a responsibility towards the country and towards the women and girls that are still in Afghanistan. So we have to do it together. And what we as European Parliament, as European Union, I think should do is first of all to put the issue on the agenda again. Because my biggest frustration is that after the many people who spoke out in September, October, right after the fall of Kabul, we also have to acknowledge that other issues came on the agenda. So my first priority is to speak about it again in the European Parliament, hopefully next month in a debate, and also create a permanent platform for Afghan women all over the world, an Afghan Women's Forum, for example, to speak with these women and not only about the women of Afghanistan.
آقای تیس میگن که خودش عضو پارلمان اتحادیه اروپاست و خودش هم تو لجنه سیاست امور خارجی هم کار میکنه و میگه نکته مهم این هست که ما با زنای افغان که در اتحادیه اروپا یا در خود اروپا زندگی میکنن با اونا باید تماس بگیریم، با اونا باید حرف بزنیم، چون میگه که یه گروه خیلی بزرگی هست. میگه مثلا با یه وزیر قدیمی حرف زدم، با یه خبرنگار حرف زدم و اونا حاضرن، اونا که من حالا تا حالا باشون حرف زدن، مسئولیت رو بگیرن و اونا از افغانستان بر نمی کنن، یادشون نمیره که موقعیت هموطنانشون چجوری هست. و میگه در سپتامبر البته هممون راجع به افغانستان حرف میزدیم، اون وقت اینم برای من دردناکه، ایشون میگن که این دیگه حالا هیچ موضوعی نیست و میگه این خیلی مهم هست که ما دوباره راجع به موقعیت افغانستان اینجا حرف بزنیم، به خاطر این ماه آینده در پارلمان اتحادیه اروپا یه بحث راجع به موقعیت افغانستان هست و میگه برای ما هم مهم هست که این زنا که اینجا هستن که یک پلتفرم برشون بسازیم یا با هم بتونن کار بکنن. So if you say we have to talk about it, okay, talking is one thing, of course, but the other thing is that we have a real humanitarian and educational crisis, one could say, in Afghanistan. Now, this is a touchy issue, I guess. So, what is the European Union actually doing in this field to improve the situation? من گفتم که خب یکیش این هست که حرف میزنید، یکیش هم اون هست که حالا خیلی در افغانستان غذا کم دارن و اتحادیه اروپا چجوری داره اینجا کمک میکنه. من میدونم که این موضوع البته حساسه ولی باز اینو میپرسم.
Well, that is exactly also why we have to put the issue high on our agendas again, because after the period that has passed, half a year now, almost, the humanitarian crisis is even bigger than we thought it would be. So there is a imminent emergency and a need for help. But giving help and helping the organizations that can provide that help as directly as possible to the Afghan people, the emergency relief help, should in no way legitimize the regime or be dependent of going through the hands of the regime, because the last thing we want is that funds that are meant and to arrive at the needs of the people in Afghanistan, in the different regions, are getting stuck in the hands of a regime that is not respecting the human rights, that is not providing a decent respect for the most fundamental rights to all Afghans.
میگه ایشون میگن که ما حد زدیم که یه بحران جلومون هست، حالا ما این بحران رو میبینیم و میبینیم که خیلی بزرگتر از این هست که ما انتظارش رو داشتیم. میگه که بحران خیلی بزرگی هست، به خاطر این ما باید کمک کنیم، ولی باید هرچی مستقیم‌تر بتونیم کمک کنیم بهتره، چون ما نمیخوایم این دولت رو به رسمیت بشناسیم و به خاطر این چون این دولت البته نه حقوق بشر رو رعایت میکنه و نه حقوق اساسی انسان رعایت میکنه. اوکی، حالا من ازشون میپرسم که خب چی میشه کرد و چی نمیشه کرد، یعنی مرز یا حدود کجاست. So my question then, Mr. Rutten, is so what can you do and where is the limit? Where would you say that okay, this is beyond, this would be too much of a official recognition, this is something we cannot do? Which humanitarian aid is possible and which one not?
We need, as a European Parliament, to get the guarantees from the European Commission and from the member states who are directly providing help through organizations, recognized international organizations, UN organizations, but also Médecins Sans Frontières and the Red Cross. We have to get the guarantees that these funds are spent where they should be spent, on the needs of the Afghan people. But having said that, we need also, and that is something that also the High Representative Borrell said, yes, we need to somehow also speak with the regime, but that does not mean that you recognize them or in any way or form should further legitimize that regime as it is. But we do also speak with other regimes that we do not approve of, but always with the objective to improve the situation of the people on the ground. But the limit is clearly that when the funds are ending up in the hands of the Taliban, or that it's unclear that the funds are spent in a way aligned with respect for the most fundamental rights and freedoms, and arriving at the people who really need them, then that is, of course, the moment to stop, and also to be very flexible and very, really steering while spending, as I call it. So be able to stop the funding at the moment you see that it's going into the wrong hands.
Just to make sure if I got you right, you said the Commission and also the NGOs, right, need a guarantee that this money is going to be spent as directly as possible to the ones who are in need. Did I get that right?
As much as possible, of course. I mean, we need to give now humanitarian relief, but my objective, my idea is that we should also make very clear to the people receiving that relief that we are doing that as directly as possible to them, because we also do not want to further legitimize the regime in Kabul, but nevertheless, we also don't want to let these people down. So yes, to a certain extent, you need to talk with the authorities for that. That is inevitable. But that is why I say this help should go as much as possible through these international NGOs, through these trusted parties that are already on the ground and have a lot of experience in doing so, because that, I think, is the best guarantee. Absolute guarantees do not exist, but that's the best guarantee to make sure that that help arrives where it should go and not ends up in the wrong hands or further legitimizes the regime.
So I don't know if you can see this. There is a reaction of a user. We have a couple of reactions. So I chose the one in English so that you can read it. Let me just translate what you said while you think of what you might reply. ایشون میفرمایند که هرچی کمک از اتحادیه اروپا یا از سازمان‌های ملل به افغانستان فرستاده میشه، میگه ما باید قول طالبان باید داشته باشیم، 100% باید مطمئن باشیم که این پول یا این کمک 100% و مستقیما به نیازمندهای افغان میرسه و به خاطر این مثل این که باید با دولت حرف یا با رژیم باید حرف بزنیم، ولی فقط با یه هدف که موقعیت یه ذره بهتر بشه. و البته ما نمیخوایم پول به دست طالبان بدیم، ولی ما تمام پول که داریم به سازمان‌های بین المللی میدیم، مثلا UN یا مدسان سان فرانتیر، اسمای مختلف به کار برد و میگه که اگر ما میفهمیم که این پول به دست طالبان مثلا صاف برسه، خب ما میتونیم فوری اینو قطع کنیم و دیگه اینو تمدید نکنیم. میگه که برای ما یه نکته خیلی مهم هست که این دولت یا این رژیم رو به رسمیت نشناسیم و به خاطر این طریق از سازمان‌های ملل خیلی مهم هست. You see the reaction here, and I would like to ask you, so if you give money, just to be very practical, let's say you have a certain amount of money and you pass it on to an NGO and the NGO passes on wheat or bread or whatever, how can you differentiate if somebody is Taliban or is not? In the end, they are Afghan. So how can you understand if somebody that you are supporting is the right one or the wrong one? من پرسیدم شما از کجا میفهمید آیا کسی رو حمایت میکنید که طالبان هست یا یه آدم عادی، بالاخره که نیازمندن و بالاخره دیگه افغانن.
Yeah, but that is a big dilemma, and I spoke about this also with Afghans, because I do not pretend to have the solution or the best idea, and it's a dilemma also for many Afghan people I spoke to, because what we do want is to relieve the immediate emergency. It is winter time now. There are people that really are relying on help, on aid to even eat the next day. And I think that yes, it is a risk that in the villages, in the regions away from Kabul, where the needs are high as well, that sometimes you also will provide aid or food to people who maybe actively or passively support the regime. I cannot deny that, but I trust the people on the ground, the people from the NGOs, the independent NGOs, who actually are experienced also in doing that. I trust them in their judgment. We have to do something, but that is something else than negotiating with the Taliban and actually letting the funds pass through their hands. That is something that we have to prevent. But I see the dilemma here, but I think that we also have to take into account that there is a responsibility for the immediate need that the people in Afghanistan have.
Okay. Dilemma is a word which I don't know in Persian. I'm sorry. جوابشون این بود که این البته یه مشکلی هست که ما البته نمیدونیم اگر کسی نیازمند هست آیا اینم واقعا فعال هست و داره طالبان رو سپورت میکنه یا غیر. میگه این البته یه مشکل خیلی بزرگی هست، ولی میگه ما در حال حاضر یه بحرانی میبینیم و ما میبینیم که هوا سرده و خیلی واقعا به کمک نیاز دارن و میگه خب شاید این ریسکی را باید این وجود داره که گاهی اون وقت پول به طالبان میدیم یا به کسی که برای که طالبان رو سپورت میکنه، ولی میگه که ما اطمینان داریم به این سازمان ها که در افغانستان هستن که اونجا که مستقلن و که دارن اونجا کار میکنن که بتونن هر چی زودتر کمک کنن. سوال آخر این حالا هست که من میخوام بپرسم اتحادیه اروپا در حال حاضر یا در این ماهای آینده چقدر پول میخواد بفرسته. My last question would be, so what do you think, do you know how much the European Union, how much funding they are going to send or how much relief help they were going to send to Afghanistan now or within the next couple of months?
I'm not exactly aware of the exact figures at the moment. I do know that after the fall of Kabul and also in the months that followed, the European Union stopped funding, and that was not, which was not clear that it would arrive as directly as possible to the Afghan people. But the European Union also committed to keep on funding the NGOs and the UN agencies that actually try to help as good as possible on the ground. And I want to repeat that I am aware of the fact that there is no perfect solution, but it's also, as I said, a big dilemma because not doing something also means that we put people that are innocent, that did not ask for this to happen, to really punish them and leave them without any help. So it's a huge dilemma, but we are trying to do the best we can in making sure that the funds arrive as directly as possible through trusted NGOs. And as I said, for me, in the European Parliament, there is no reason at all at this point to even discuss formal recognition or legitimizing this regime at all, because we clearly see, and I want to really emphasize that we are also depending on the sources that provide us with the real situation on the ground. And if I may be so free, and maybe people will criticize me for that, but I do not take the images that are brought to us of people going back to the university for granted. I see that also as a way to present a picture to us that might look good, also to do a bit of a public relations effort. So my quest, and I think our collective quest, ends when everybody is really free to choose to go to universities, to schools again, and to fulfill their dreams. And that has to do with a fundamental respect for human rights and the rights of women and girls.
So there was, just before we talked, I saw the news that a couple of female students were allowed to go back to university. I think it was in Kabul, and the BBC had been reporting this. So you don't think that this is something that we could trust?
No, I think it happened, and I saw the same images also in the Dutch media in my own country. I think it happened, but I do not accept that as, okay, now everything is good and people can go to school and to universities again, because we are dealing with a regime that is not democratic, that has not the objective of providing the same rights to everyone and to be respectful of human rights and fundamental rights in general. So therefore, I do not trust everything. I mean, the report was genuine, and what they reported was apparently true, because the people were going to university and were allowed into the university and the classes. But that is something else than a established and full respect of everyone's right to pursue dreams, to follow education, etc. So yes, if it's true, I see what I see, and it's true that these people went to university, but it needs to happen a lot more before we can say that we have a full respect for everyone's rights for education and a decent respect of their fundamental rights.
Okay. میگن که خب البته این یه حل کامل نیست که ما حالا داریم سعی میکنیم پول به سازمان‌های بین المللی بدیم که اونا بتونن به مردمای افغانستان کمک کنن، ولی میگه یه حل کامل در این موقعیت نمیشه پیدا کرد و این واقعا یه مشکل خیلی بزرگی هست. میگه که اصلا برای من غیر ممکنه، اصلا هیچ بحثی راجع به این برای من وجود نداره که این رژیم را به رسمیت بشناسیم، اصلا غیر ممکن. و میگه که من پرسیدم شما شنیدید حتما که امروز یا دیروز اخبار بود که بعضی از دانشجوها زنها میتونستن برگردن به دانشگاه وقتی، و ایشون میگه خب شاید درسته، آره، ولی میگه اینم البته تبلیغات از طرف رژیم و تو وقتی که همه بتونن برن دانشگاه و همه بتونن یه زندگی آزاد داشته باشن، ما امکانشو نداریم که با این رژیم همکاری بکنیم. میگه که این 100% غیر دموکراتیه، اونا حقوق بشر رو اصلا رعایت نمیکنن و به خاطر این اصلا حرفی نیست که ما اونا رو به عنوان رسمیت بشناسیم. Thank you very much for explaining us what impressions you had on the conference and what you think is possible to do, or how the European Union can act when it comes to Afghanistan. Thank you very much for talking to us. خیلی ممنون که با ما بودید و که به ما توضیح دادید در این کنفرانس شما چه فکرایی داشتید و حالا اتحادیه اروپا چه رفتاری داره با این کمک به افغانستان. Thank you.
Thank you. We will continue to follow it together. Thank you.
Okay.